Welcome to the panel presented by Sport Chek on location at the flagship location at West Edmonton Mall. It may be a CBA mandated day off for the team, but two guys who never take a day off, Jack Michaels and Bob Stauffer, both from 630 Chad. Gentlemen, I got to ask you, because the Twitter world is going a little bit of a frenzy here. Jack, was that a goal last night on Connor McDavid's stick?
Well, certainly in my estimation it was. I'm rarely, the one that kind of says, all right, that's a goal, and then when it goes the other way, they missed it. I usually leave that to the big fella. But I got to say that I think we're to the point with some of the reviews that we're trying to create other explanations in our head for what we're seeing. Well, there might have been snow on the ice, or this parallax situation, but this is a puck along the ice. I didn't see a wobble. I looked for it, and I don't think I would have been so emphatic, but I'm looking at it. I mean, look, I grabbed glasses last year to be sure on certain things.
Yeah.
And I've now retrained myself this season to trust what I see, because I'm now back to exactly seeing what I need to see out there. And I think, to be honest with you, we're going down these different paths and trying to create other explanations. Sometimes what you see is what is. And I think that was lost a little bit.
All right, I'm going to take it a completely different direction, okay? And here we go. So what we're doing is we're coming up with explanations so that we don't make the officials out to be wrong. We justify their call instead of just making the right call. And there's a secondary byproduct of this. And it's something that, I mean, when a senior executive like Brian Burke says, good teams get more calls. That is an undeniable fact. For anybody that watched the Edmonton Oilers' evolution in the early 1980s, when they played the Islanders in those early series, they didn't get the majority of the calls. By the time the late 80s rolled around and Edmonton played Boston in 88 and 90, they got a lot of calls. That's kind of how it works. So what we're seeing, and why there's so much exasperation and frustration out in oil country, is there have been some tough calls go via video review against the Edmonton Oilers at critical times, and the primary reason is because they do not want to upstage the officials, and the officials tend to lean to beneficial calls to good teams, and the Oilers are not there yet. So that is part of the reason why we end up seeing what happens, which is why somebody maybe sends a tweet out and said, hey, did the Oilers win 2-0 last night in OT? Because that's exactly what happened. Fortunately for Edmonton, they were able to get the eventual game winner.
I will say this, though. Edmonton, unlike the two of us, shook it off, went right back to work, and potted the game winner. And it's a huge goal for Oscar Klefbom because it's his first of the year. And I think that rewards him for what he's given the Oilers this year, which is 25 minutes a night, a pretty quality play. I think Oscar's had a really good season, but I think he needed it last night to get his mindset in the proper fashion.
Yeah, I talked to him after the game. He kind of joked about it, but you can kind of sense the relief a little bit. He finally got that one out of the way.
Yeah.
That goal coming 2:42 into the extra frame. A big win for the team, but also a pretty big win for the newly appointed head coach, Ken Hitchcock, in his homecoming, getting his first victory in his Rogers Place debut. Gentlemen, we're 2-1-1 right now in the Hitchcock era of hockey, but we're starting to see a different style. Are we starting to see that trademark Hitchcock-style hockey when it's tight games heading into the third period, one-goal games, and the Oilers are right now looking like they're, keeping their head afloat?
I think there's a slight structural difference to how Edmonton's playing defensively, and I think there's going to be some growing pains until a team accumulates 6, 7, 8, 9 practices and is a little bit more comfortable with it. And so right now we're erring on the side of caution. I do think the offense will come more in time. There's no question the team's playing different. And there's no question that the players are going to, becoming experienced to having Ken Hitchcock on them on everything, because that is part of Hitch's nature.
I think just the subtext to your question, Tony, some would say, oh, do you mean just low-scoring games all the time? And I would say, look, don't get caught up in the fact that Ken Hitchcock is the head coach and that suddenly means lower scoring. Yes, he brought Dallas into a position where all of a sudden the Stars were a top 5 team in 5-on-5 goals against last year. But Tyler Seguin, a career high 40 goals. Jamie Benn had 36, and Alex Radulov blew his previous career highs completely out of the water. So he's not about to stifle his creative offensive players. I think the biggest thing that Ken Hitchcock is eventually going to get to is he wants those second, third, and fourth lines winning their individual battles, finishing even or better each night. And because when you're playing those one-goal games, it's lines 2 through 4 that often can make the difference. If one of those lines has an edge over one of its counterparts, that's where you end up on the plus side of the one-goal games.
Transition Puljujärvi in the top 6 last night would not surprise me in the next couple of weeks if we might see. Remember,
and yes, the soul showed some glimpses.
He had a good game, but in terms of Kaido Yamamoto, who was defensively reliable, just couldn't finish plays off. I think he's going to be, at some point over the next 3 weeks, he's going to be back up here because there's others that haven't capitalized on the minutes that they've had, and I think there's a higher ceiling with Yamamoto as well, and the Oilers brass is going to want to make Yamamoto part of things as well.
Very quickly, guys, Ken Hitchcock did talk about the superstars in the lineup, but he talked about the strength of the team, that being goaltending. He was very adamant about the goaltending that he received on Sunday from Cam Talbot and the 3 starts that Mikko Koskinen has had under Hitchcock's tenure. Right now, is it Mikko Koskinen's net right now with the 6-2-1 record and Talbot being winless since last 6 since October 28th?
Well, Bob and I differ slightly on this. I feel like if Edmonton had won the game against Dallas, say 4-3, they might have gone right back to Cam Talbot against Los Angeles and tried to get him a win against one of the league's weaker teams playing on home ice. But with Koskinen having shut out the Stars, it'd be hard to argue going back to Cam Talbot with Mikko Koskinen playing so well. I will say this. I think the primary difference between the goaltenders this year is not in terms of soft goals against on the part of Cam Talbot. I just feel like Mikko Koskinen, more often than not, has had the extra save that Cam Talbot was known for a couple years ago and thus far hasn't been able to provide Edmonton with to this point. But I still, even with the shutout, I think Ken Hitchcock is going to find a way to get Cam Talbot a couple of starts heading into Christmas. And by a couple, I mean maybe 4 or 5, because he said it, and I believe him when he says it. He thinks he's going to need 2 goaltenders, and Ken Hitchcock found out the hard way last year you need 2 goaltenders, because when Ben Bishop went down, Dallas never recovered.
You know, you need 2 goaltenders because of the travel in the Western Conference. The other thing with Cam Talbot, 3 of the last 4 years, he has had pedestrian starts in the first half of the year. I mean, there was a stretch where I think Nielsen in
Right.
that
Had it for a month.
Right, he had it for a month, went like 7-3-1 during that stretch. So I think Koskinen's mentally sharper and more competitive than Anders Nielsen. But I think right now you got to ride Koskinen for the next, certainly for the next couple of games, and see whether or not the Oilers can continue to get some wins, because right now they need them.
And just to back up Bob's point, in all of those seasons, Cam Talbot rebounded to have a very strong second half. So that bodes well for Edmonton.
So we'll see who tends the twine tomorrow night when the Oilers host the LA Kings, the same LA Kings team that they lost to on Sunday by a score of 5-2. Jack and Bob will have your call on 6:30 Chat. I'll have you covered right here on Oilers TV and EdmontonOilers.com. This has been The Panel, presented by Sport Chek.